This is Nan McKay, and this is the story of Laura Yamanaka. She has a background with the Big Five accounting programs, and she transitioned to her own company where she advises small and medium sized businesses on financial operations. Well, during the pandemic, small businesses have sought her advice and counsel in times that are getting very tough, and survival is an issue. So let's talk about that. Welcome, Laura Yamanaka.
I'm glad to be here, Nan.
So what are you finding with small businesses that are coming to you? What's their position? What's happening with them?
Well, the world's been turned upside down right now, frankly. Um, I don't care how prepared you were. I don't care how properly you set up things, how much reserves you had in place, how much credit you had available. Nobody was prepared for the faucet to just turn off on businesses, other than if you're in actually Amazon or Zoom or one of those types of businesses. It's hit all industries. It's hit all sizes. It doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter um, how prepared you were. Nothing has prepared companies for this kind of occurrence. And there's very little history, frankly, other than the Spanish flu uh, in the early 1900s that can really prepare us for this kind of activity. So everybody is, and you layer on top of that, people are concerned about their health. They're concerned about their employees' health. They're concerned about their family. They're concerned about the whole way of life. So you put that on top of economic stress of operating your business, and it's probably the most challenging time businesses will ever or have ever entertained in their lifetimes, frankly.
Well, and it happened so fast. It was like,
Hmm.
overnight, it seems like.
Yes, yes. I think that most businesses have been preparing for a recession, a downturn in the economy. We've had a really long run of good economic times, and people were being prudent and saying, all good things must come to an end at some point in time. So they have been preparing. But like I said, nobody could prepare for this kind of magnitude where one day you're open and the next day you are completely shut down in a lot of businesses. We have restaurant clients that had to just close and had to figure out a different way of operating.
Well, and they talked about, of course, at the government level, having uh, loans and perhaps those that can turn into grants. I know I have a friend who has applied several times
Yes,
and
yes.
waited through everything and still can't get it.
Right.
He's
That's
denied, but he's not approved either yet.
right, right. There, he's in that big limbo land that, frankly, the majority of applications probably were. It is hard to roll out a national program basically overnight and to make sure you're going through all the different components of the government, the IRS, Treasury, SBA, to try to have a solution that can help most of the small businesses out there. And what we've seen, it hasn't been entirely successful. Um, it doesn't, there's a lot of pain that's going out there. And I think business owners um, I've told them this is no longer a marathon, right? This is just survival, and it's survival, and you don't know when help is going to come. And you can't rely on help, frankly, coming. You're going to have to go back to what entrepreneurs are good at, which is how are we going to survive in this situation with the circumstances that we know of? Um, it takes a little bit of time to get there. You have to grieve that your business is no longer the way it was going to be. Your plans that you and the scenarios, you put together all these business plans and 5-year projections and 3-year plans and compensation plans, and it's all out the window. All out the window. Save it. You never know when you're going to. It's You can come back to that, but for today, you have to think about survival, and survival becomes, and you have to define it for your business, right? Is the survival of your business? Is it the survival of the business owner? Is the survival defined as maintaining your employees or your market share or a lot of different things. Survival is going to mean a different definition for each business owner. But first off, you have to decide what is your objective. And then you move on from there, because there's going to be a different answer for each business owner, even if they're in the same industries. There's going to be commonalities, but each journey is going to be unique for that business owner.
So tell me some stories.
Uh, I wish I could tell you some good stories. It's okay. So I think we're right in the middle of the stories right now. I would prefer to think we're right in probably in the beginning of the stories, and I hope that some period down the line that we can reconvene and you'll hear the whole story, the successes and the eventual failures. So for right now, uh, like I said, there are very few businesses that are doing well, or even who are not doing extremely poorly. How about that? Everybody's in cash conservation mode. If you have had to shut down, you have no money coming in. Some companies have been able to convert to remote basis, right? If they had online traffic, if they are in the consulting business or anything that can be done online, um, companies have made the transition to that. Just because you do that does not mean you have the same level of success or profitability that you've had before. And so companies are every company I know is reworking their projections, and trying to figure out where they're going to be. What is their best guess? So right now, I think if anybody tells anybody, I know, or do this, or gives any kind of advice with any kind of insurance, I would frankly run like crazy, because no one knows. And even in the government programs, as you've seen, and we've all seen, there's changes. I think at one point in time, I was pretty frustrated. I was like going, how can they make a decision? You've already applied. And then 2 hours later, they're coming up with clarification and clarification, clarification. I think in the beginning, everybody was pretty frustrated, but now we know that is the new normal. And so you don't get to change the rules. It is what it is. And you don't get to say there are no more new rules, because it is what it is. So, again, as business owners, small business owners, we're ideally suited to having to make changes on the fly all the time. And sometimes too often on the fly, right? And in this case, it's a skill set that's going to work for the business owners, because they're going to be able to respond to the stimuli that is coming after them, after them, after them. And I think that's what it was kind of funny for most of my clients who are small business owners that really like to make changes frequently. We were trying to say to them, okay, you can only change this 3 times before we move on. And now it's like, hey, get ready and be ready to change each time. And that's going to end up being an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage 2 months ago.
How far out are they looking?
Oh, so right initially people were just looking to tomorrow, right? Or to the next payroll or the rent check, or um, they were just looking at cash flow. And to a great extent, that's what businesses are still looking at, cash flow. Um, Now some businesses are, and especially with the PPP money, if they have received funds, or the EIDLs, they're looking and seeing how long can they last, and what are their guesses of what is business going to look like in that next phase. So some clients have realized that their business, because they were high contact, high people who really depended on hand-to-hand contact, or crowded, what we would call crowded conditions now, their business is not coming back in the near future, not until there's some sort of medical solution that could be assured. So they're going to have to decide maybe a part of their business that they would consider kind of a sideline, or just an accommodation for certain clients, that's becoming their primary business model now. And they're trying to determine, can they scale it? How long is this going to last? And is it going to require a lot of investment in capital or time? Because they don't have either of those anymore. It's basically whatever you're doing right now, what can you do with the existing resources that you have, and preferably not all of them, because you don't know if that too is going to change.
So are you getting some resistance in a sense from people who just hate the idea of changing, particularly something that maybe they have done the same way for a long, long time?
Yes, in the beginning there was, there was that hope that this is just going to be for a week, a month, we can outlast it. My customers will stay with us. That that notion was rapidly, you know, tossed out. I'd say probably within the first 2 weeks when people realized the world was in this position. So we had some clients that said, well, we're diversified, we're international, we don't rely on China, we're going to get through this. And as the virus kind of swept through, frankly, every place, they realized they too have to change. I will say that I didn't encounter as much as resistance as I thought I would. People, they read the news, they watch TV, they listen to podcasts, they talk to their neighbors. You just go out into the world and see how little traffic there is. They know that they have to make changes. The question is what? And and like I said, juggling and saying what is the most important thing to them. For some business owners, it's about survival, to getting to the end of the tunnel and then being able to ramp up, bring people back. For others, they're trying to hold on to their to their employees as long as possible. They're more like family, and trying to help everybody take care. And some business owners are just thinking about themselves, and you get the whole breadth, I mean, of the world, I think, in that considerations.
Have you run into any of the owners who've actually contracted the virus?
It's so interesting because out of here in LA, there was like this illness that was going around. I had it December, January, February. It had kind of like the same symptoms, but people we didn't know people weren't going to hospital in droves, right? But it was a very bad flu, everybody thought. So now a lot of us are saying, well, we had a lot of the symptoms, we just didn't have to go to the hospital, but the cough, the breathing, whatever. So a lot of people, I don't know if it's wishful thinking that they had it, um, and now they're hopefully immune, or or if it was just a bad flu. People are starting to be impacted by it. They've had employees who have contracted the virus. They've had family members who have contracted the virus, and it's very hard because in some cases it has been terminal. In other cases, it's been very mild. That they've been able to stay in their house, self quarantine, and don't get me wrong, it is it is exhausting. They are unable to work, all of that, but they survive. They didn't have to go to the hospital. They live. So it's also interesting how people have responded. So if they do not know of anybody who specifically has been impacted, there's a different reaction than business owners who have had personal encounters with that illness through family, friends, employees. There's a much greater emphasis on the health and the reality of what could happen, and kind of a different perspective in life. They're a little bit, frankly, more open and easier because they say, hey, I have my health, and that's the most important thing. People who have not had the direct contact are still kind of, trying to have everything, right? Survive, still make my numbers this year, still be positioned for the new rollouts, new product development, trying to hit their 3-year plan, because maybe we'll just have to push everything into the second and third year. So it's a little bit more difficult to get people to understand that those scenarios probably are not realistic. So don't count on them as far as expending money.
I know, having had a business since 1980, I mean, there's a lot you have to have your head into it, just simply doing the
Yeah.
business.
Yes.
And I'm thinking of some of the people that you mentioned that have had family members that have even died from it.
Yes.
I don't know how, I just don't know how you could, your head could even be in both.
I, th- I really don't have any idea, right? Um, but I see business owners do that, where they realize they are dealing with personal heartbreak and concern. And most of the business owners that are able to be still heads down and focused realize that they just look at their business, their employees, as an extension of family. And I've got to take care of everybody. And I don't have the luxury of indulging myself in grief. I'll do that later. I see a lot of that pushing it down later, right? And frankly, not dealing with it currently.
Have some of the people who have had family members die, are the family members elderly? Are they like their mother and father, or?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Most of the people who have um, passed away have been over that 65-year limit. Although that I did, one of the people did have a child
Hmm.
who had the COVID and is still did not pass away, but has significant health issues at
Hmm.
the present, and
That
probably will be ongoing.
so hard, so
It
hard.
is. It is.
What industry, just in the people that you are talking to, what industry do you think has been hit the hardest?
Anything in hospitality, entertainment, event related. So I know, well, we're in Los Angeles, a lot of events, a lot of entertainment, a lot of hospitality. The restaurants, a lot of them have been able to convert into delivery pickup options. I don't think that's a viable solution in the long run. It just prolongs it, So they've been able to reduce staff and still keep some sort of cash flow coming in, but it does not replace, the revenue levels that they had before. Anybody who had to do entertainment or events where you're bringing people together, they said their business has just dropped to nothing. I was talking to a couple of people who are in event management. They said in the space of 2 weeks, they went from millions and millions of bookings down to nothing,
Boy.
you know. And initially, people had pushed it out. Oh, okay, this is going to be down. We'll be down a month, so we'll just defer everything. But after the first 2 weeks, it went to zero, and they don't know when they're going to be able to come back from it. So sometimes some businesses don't have options as far as that goes.
Do you have, as we leave the podcast and the video, do you have any advice for anybody from a financial point of view or any other point of view?
All right. So the first thing is, and I know it's going to sound really, it's not going to make sense, but I'm saying, don't be afraid. It is what it is. Don't be afraid to look at your financials and look at things, because whether you look at them or you don't look at them, it's going to be the same. So it doesn't really matter. Now, if you look at your financials and your numbers and have alternative plans, one, it's going to make you feel better because you're going to think through the process a little bit more as far as what's going to happen, what do you need to do, and maybe how you can buy yourself some more time, because that's what we're talking about right now, frankly, is just buying time till we have more information, more help, more something changes externally, right? I find business owners are they feel better when they're doing something. They're action oriented. So sometimes even the the simple action of creating new spreadsheets and thinking about what is what am I going to do if this happens? What am I going to do mostly if this doesn't happen, right? How can I last? How do I want to live? It helps them feel a sense of control. And now you can look and see, you can choose which alternatives you have. We've also told people that right now, for a lot of these people, because they've got PPP money or EIDL money, that you have more choices now, right? You have decisions that you can make and go through the different scenarios and see what you can do, and more importantly, how you feel about making those decisions, right? During this time, usually in business, we say it's really more black and white, bottom line, the numbers. But now it's frankly more than that, a great deal more than that. I'd say it's more, frankly, your emotional connection to your work and the people you work with and your community, um, as much as the bottom line and making numbers work. So I know a lot of businesses are, what keeps them going, frankly, what makes them feel good about what they're doing and what keeps their employees going is giving back to the community in this way. And so sometimes it might not make total economic sense, but they're willing to put a portion of their expenses, whatever revenues are coming in, so that they feel that they're giving back, and it makes people want to pull together and work as a team on everything else. So I think that's critical if you can do that with your company. Um, I've also said this is the time to start thinking about the post-COVID era. And like I said, it's not going to be the same as it was. So some companies, it's going to be minor changes and they can go back to things as normal. You need to understand whether you're one of those companies or one of those companies that your business is never going to be the same again. It's going to be radically different. And you have to decide what you want to do if you want to live like that. Some businesses are going to have to decide if they want to get out while they can, cut their losses. Um, and I'm finding people now are more connected to their community. And so that maybe their business is less about making a lot of money and selling for a big price and going on and buying, the fantasy house, fantasy car, fantasy whatever, and more about how can I make my company serve my community in addition to having a viable business. And maybe that's at least that's making them feel better now. It's holding the team together. It's holding the employees to a higher vision, I think, of purpose. And I'm finding those companies are a little bit more successful right now in getting hopefully through that tunnel. Um, I'm a financial person, so I always have to focus on the numbers, right? I know in the beginning I said the numbers are the numbers. They're, our situation is going to be the situation, whether you look at it or not. But I really think that the more information that you have at your disposal allows you to make better decisions. Does it change the reality? No, but maybe it gives you more time as far as being able to stay in your business, or allows you to say, maybe I can devote some of these resources to the community, and that's good enough for me right now. And sometimes I think the community does come back and takes care of those businesses who take care of them. And so maybe that's also a good business strategy in addition to being the right thing to do.
And who knows?
And the final thing is, I say, reach out to your network, your community, to people online, to podcasts like yours, because I think people are very willing to help and give their perspective right now. There's no expert out there, okay? There just isn't. Like I said earlier, if anybody tells you they're an expert on something, run like crazy, okay? But there are a lot of people who have different perspectives, and we're all going to have to learn to be better consumers of information and data and be able to apply it and not rely on any single source or, frankly, anybody to save you. Now, the good thing is you are your own hero, right? From my perspective. So I kind of say, I'd really rather rely on somebody I know, me, as opposed to somebody we don't know someplace else, right? And ultimately, I think that as Americans, we are just accustomed to making things work in spite of odds, and that tendency, I think, is going to be definitely a necessary characteristic right now. But we've done it before, and we'll do it again. We wouldn't have started businesses if we didn't believe that, right?
And I think I hear you saying maybe it's time for a little reset from the all about me.
Yes. Well, I'm seeing, yes, I personally believe that. And I see people fall into two buckets. It seems like there's always two buckets now. It just seems to be so, a lot more black and white. But there are people who are just about preserving themselves. They are, there's less of them, I will say that. And they are, just for my um, qualitative observation, they're the people that are hurting more. They're the people who are more anguished. And does not have anything to do with actual dollars in the bank account, right? It's not about whether you know, um, they don't have any or they have many zeros behind that. And the people who are feeling good about what they're doing, like I said, they are focusing on their communities, their families, their employees. They're thinking much more holistically. And those are not the people with a bunch of zeros behind, you know, the numbers in the bank account. Sometimes that's very small, but it's allowing them to find another day. It's allowing them to find new meaning in what they're doing. It's allowing their employees and their families to feel hope and to have a concrete work to put against that hope. And if I had to bet on those companies, people people have to have hope. They have to believe that they're making a difference, not only just bringing home a paycheck. And those companies seem to be doing much better, at least right now. We'll see what happens in another month. But for right now, that's the direction I would pick.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate your insight, your experience, and your advice.
Oh, well, thank you, Nan. And to better times.
Yes.